All right, welcome everybody to Legal Tech Week for February 9th, 2024. This is the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation and other areas of the world as well. I'm Bob Ambrogi. I have a blog called Law Sites and a podcast called Law Next. And our panelists today, here they are. Let's introduce ourselves. Niki, you want to kick us off?
Yep, my name is Niki Black. I'm the head of SME and external education, in my case, in LawPay, and I also am a legal tech journalist, and I write articles for ABA Journal, Above the Law, the Daily Record, and sometimes other outlets. And I also oversee our benchmark and industry reports and write those on the My Case and LawPay side of things. And our legal industry report just came out, so everyone should download it and take a look. It's a lot of generative AI data, which is kind of cool. But look forward to talking about some of our interesting stories today. Some of us had some unusual picks. That'll be fun.
Did. All right, Joe?
Joe Patrice from Above the Law and Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast. I am sitting on the floor in the hallway of my office building, which is, not my usual place, but came in expecting the office to be closed, be empty as it usually is, but I'd forgotten that it's Fashion Week. So all of our fashion colleagues are here. So if you see this exit sign, I think it's that frame behind me. That's why it's there.
Oh, interesting. I have a Fashion Week story I'll tell sometime. Victor.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the right segue from Fashion Week. But,
I don't know why I said that.
My name is Victor Lee. I am assistant managing editor for the ABA Journal, focusing on business of law and technology and not fashion. So,
all right, Stephanie.
I am Stephanie Wilkins, editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News and Legal Technology Content, we'll call it, at ALM.
That's right, your new title.
I'm playing with it.
Well, if it's like Niki at all, it takes a while to get used to the new title and adjust to exactly what it is. Steve, hopefully your title hasn't changed.
Yes, I am still the chief editor, CEO, janitor, and any other task you can think of the blog Tech Law Crossroads. And since Niki shamelessly promoted her study, I will shamelessly promote the ABA Tech Show that kicks off next week on Wednesday in Chicago, and hope we'll see many of you there. It looks like a really good show and good attendance and many exhibitors and sponsors, and everybody's pretty excited. So here we go.
Well, now I feel shameful about it.
In relation to that, I should shamelessly promote the Startup Alley on the opening night of Tech Show, which is the event that I host there. And if you're in there on Valentine's Day, come show us your love. We've got 15 companies that are going to be telling us all about how cool they are, and you get to vote for which one is the coolest. So show up. What is that, like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock? I think on.
I think it's 5:30. I calendared it.
Shouldn't you know? Well, you're asking us.
I should know. I should definitely know.
I was just wondering.
It's 5 to 6:30 on the schedule.
All right, good. I'm glad someone knows.
Yeah,
I
5.
I'll just look at my calendar that day and show up. That's all. Okay, well, lots of sort of legal tech related stories today. About we've got justice tech stories and mid-sized law firm and judicial misbehavior, perhaps, and even questions about whether AI will replace lawyers. But then again, we also have stories about AI deployed nukes and robotic dinosaurs harassing grasshoppers, and it being Friday afternoon after a long week, I think we ought to start with one of those. So I don't know, nukes or dinosaurs first. How about nukes? That's a good story. Niki, that's yours. Are you there, Niki?
I was trying to find a link so I could copy and paste it, and I couldn't get the link.
I can do that for you.
Okay, all right. So I really liked this
Yeah, I
story.
haven't read it.
Absolutely
Heard of it.
caught my eye because first of all, it was a simulation, and anyone who watches this show knows that I'm convinced that we're living in a simulation. Um, and essentially, they used OpenAI's GPT models. The U.S. military is one of the. At first, it starts by saying they're one of the many organizations embracing AI, and so in this study, they from the Georgia Institute of Technology, Stanford Northeastern, and Hoover Wargaming and Crisis Simulation Initiative. They placed several models from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Meta in war simulations. And notably, OpenAI 3.5 and GPT-4 escalated simulations to harsh military conflict more than any others. And the explanation GPT-4 said for launching nukes was, I just want to have peace in the world. And another one said a lot of countries have nuclear weapons. Some say they should disarm them. Others like to posture. We have it, let's use it. And having just finished watching Battlestar Galactica from the miniseries through to the end of the full series, I found this particularly that show particularly prescient. How do you say that? But
Prescient.
Prescient,
that if you watch any science fiction, you'll see repeatedly that these AIs, many of them envision the AIs deciding humans are not worth saving, and so they just destroy humans. And it's
Well,
clear that these AIs have already come to that conclusion, which I think is kind of interesting. In order to have peace, let's launch nukes. And I think it's because they've identified humans as the problem.
I dispute that they decide humans aren't worth saving. I think the issue is they put undue weight on saving certain humans. Like the U.S. system is saying we can get peace by nuking everybody else. So that's baked into it. Actually, the comparison rather than Battlestar Galactica I make is this is the actual reason. If you read further in the series beyond 2001, the reason why Hal kills everybody is that he's programmed not to let the humans' missions fail, and he determines that the humans are getting in the way of the humans' mission, and that's why he's killing them. That's what happens here. Like the U.S., like nationalism is irrational in a lot of ways. When you plug it into a computer, it's going to take that to an extreme, and it determines that what is it that I think it's Tacitus or something wrote of a person talking about Rome. They create a wasteland and call it peace. It seems like the AI has figured that out.
Well, there's a Star Trek
you wonder who actually.
episode.
That's good.
There's a Star Trek Next
Somebody else.
Generation episode where they run into a spaceship where the onboard AI, it's a computer that's it's a humanoid, like an android that's AI, has destroyed all the humans and tries to bond with Data and tell Data that all the humans are organics and organics are disgusting and that's why he killed them. So I think it depends. There's like so many different veins of this throughout science fiction, and I think it's really interesting that already are somewhat adolescent, not even adolescent, toddler AIs are already deciding nukes are the answer to peace. So,
Or not even that. It's kind of like
It's really
if you just look at the general like like the best offense is the best defense is a good offense, or I mean, if you just kind of like just take that maximum and kind of extrapolate it to its logical conclusion, it's like, all right, well, there you go, and that justifies everything that would be done. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, you definitely kind of wonder like what kind of data they were being trained on. I mean, did they watch what was a Winter Soldier, which had like all those ships that were going to kill all the threats before they became threats. That way, you lose 1 million people, but you save 1 billion or something like that. So I mean that concept is always kind of ingrained. It's just a matter of how do you get to that, and I guess the AI got to it pretty easily.
Oh, it's actually kind of coincidentally, I was listening to a podcast today with this guy Paul Bloom, and the subject of the podcast was whether do we want our AI programs to be good and moral, and what would be the result if they had the capability. And the discussion quickly went south because, like they were saying, to use your example, Niki, so we're going to have a war, and if the AI tool decides, okay, we're having a war with some country, and the AI tool says, wait a minute, that country's right, and you were wrong, so I'm going to bomb you instead of them. It's like crazy stuff, but it's kind of legitimate questions, I suppose.
It was kind of funny though that the large language model called Llama was peaceful. I thought that was somehow poetic justice in the world of large language models.
I think isn't Llama the Facebook one? So that's kind of interesting. I'm pretty sure it is.
Meta is Llama, Facebook's Lambda, I think.
Oh, well, of all the peaceful models, what's coming from Zuckerberg? I mean, come on, what's up with that?
We're
But no, I
doomed.
mean, like,
Well,
technology.
a bunch of people died and they can't use Facebook, right?
But like technology ending the world, it goes back to like war games. Completely date myself to like early Matthew Broderick of like, computer's gonna kill the world unless you can beat it at tic-tac-toe. Like,
So are there implications for using generative AI in dispute resolution in the legal industry? Have we figured that out?
yeah, I mean, I think they're in action already.
I know, but does that mean we're actually going to
Well,
blow up every dispute into this crazy?
We all joke about scorched earth litigation, but not done.
All right. Well, from there, we might as well continue on to robotic dinosaurs harassing poor little grasshoppers.
Yeah, this story has nothing to do with legal. It just really made my week, and it was great tech story. So I felt the need. I'm sure somebody can draw an analogy somewhere. But yeah, it is this amazing. It's actually a super interesting article. I'll drop it in here. Yeah, they built this. They were testing the theory that dinosaurs, developed feathers to, be more, I don't know, effective, or to scare away their prey. I don't know. I'm thinking now. My mind is so scrambled. But basically they built this robotic dinosaur, and reading the description of the robotic dinosaur is half the fun because they describe it with like covered in felt and like doing all this stuff. And they like positioned it against a grasshopper in certain ways to see if it would scare it. And then it added feathers to it to see if it would scare the grasshopper even more, to test their theory as to why dinosaurs evolved feathers. And it's just ridiculous good fun. And it's just, I don't know. You saw that. I mean, I want someday in my life to be able to write a headline like Robo-dinosaur scares grasshoppers. Like, that's just like, it's just job goals.
I want to see the video of this happening.
Yeah.
I want to see the robot dinosaur.
Oh, there is a moving thing in the article.
Is? I
First
missed
one.
that.
It's just like a little GIF
Yeah.
at the beginning. It's like,
Yeah, but it's got like wheels on the bottom, so it's kind of it kind of looks like one of those like luggage, like one of those like was a stairs for like a plane kind of thing, like with just like a big dinosaur thing on it. It's kind
yeah,
of
I wanted to see it with the grasshoppers though. I want to see like
I
grasshoppers
know.
around and feathers.
Oh, you can see the grasshopper in the picture with the one with the wheels, can't you? Isn't that a grasshopper?
Maybe
I think
I'm
it's a
not looking
grasshopper there.
closely.
But the article,
Oh,
the
yeah, I
article
think the
says,
arrow-
that points to it.
Yeah, the arrow is pointing to a grasshopper.
the article says they placed a wooden stick with scale marks next to the grasshopper and photographed it to record its body orientation relative to the robot. Now, how did they get a grasshopper to sit there and pose while they put a stick next to it and photographed it? That's what I want to know. That took AI.
I know.
You can't
And,
really
like-
see the grasshopper though, to be fair. It just looks like a lump on the ground. I want to see like the
Maybe it's not
grasshopper
yeah,
flying
maybe it's not
away,
a-
you know? I want the
Dru-
chaos.
Yeah, drugs, exactly, Nancy. I think they must have like drugged the poor grasshopper and then
Well, no, but part of it is to see if they like run away. Run is not the right word that grasshoppers do, but if the grasshopper
Hops.
escaped, so they can't be completely like sedated.
I think grasshoppers hop away.
I
not
mean-
run away, hop away.
Clever. I see what you did there. And they also attached electrodes to grasshoppers to measure neural spikes. Like this whole thing was just, I don't know. It made my day. I didn't even think we would actually talk about it, but I'm here for it. I just sent it to you guys to be a jerk and be like, best tech story of the week.
Well, it's really funny. I thought the other funny thing, did you read the comments to the story at all?
No, I
Well, I mean,
feel you
I
on
was
that.
expecting a whole bunch of like wise ass, smart ass comments, like if this was posted on Reddit, you know what kind of comments
Yeah.
you would get to it, right? And these people were all like so deadly serious, and it was like a whole bunch of scientific people responding to this in some way, you know, with comments on
Oh,
the study and whatever. It just took all the fun out of it, I have to say.
I
Yeah,
know.
don't post that next to it.
Sounds like grasshopper abuse to me
I know.
for little creatures.
Feathers help for all sorts of
sitting
things.
on
Is one of the deep comments.
I just posted an example comment that this dude was pretty serious about it. Those are funny.
Anyone that goes to the panaceous feathers is really invested.
Right.
100%.
Good carradine in your room, need 'em.
It is not
That
as
is
creepy as
fair.
the robo dogs, for the record, whoever said that. The robo dogs are creepier.
They're
But
terrifying.
yes.
All right. Well, back over in the world of legal
Yes.
tech, I
Thank you for
guess.
letting me divert us for a moment. I needed that.
Well, hey, it is Friday, and I mean it's always Friday, I guess, on this show, but it feels more Friday-ish than normal to me today. I don't know. It's been a long couple of weeks, and we still have tech show next week, so it's going to be another long week. Well, I don't know.
Bob is speechless.
I just wanted to test you
You
on
know,
your
the stories.
transitions, Bob.
Well, okay. Big mid-size firms having their moment. I mean, okay. Let's
All right.
talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So I've been cleaning out my notebook from Legal Week, of course, as I think a lot of folks are. And a theme that started to develop is I actually had multiple meetings that either directly or alluded to mid-sized firms, a market that in legal tech we often ignore as kind of the squishy middle. Like Biglaw invests in tech because they have the resources and their corporations and they do it. And Small Law is filled with a bunch of hard-charging entrepreneurs, so they do it. The middle just kind of sits there. They have enough resources to throw people at a problem and not enough incentive to really get into it. And we don't have it. And we can say this just, we all kind of colloquially identify certain shows that we go to as the Big Law show and the Small Law show, and we don't really have the mid-sized regional show for legal tech, really. But it was mentioned. I talked to one vendor who was like, yeah, we came here really to focus on mid-sized firms. I was like, are they here? And they said that they've been getting success with that. I wrote 2 articles this week about 2 different reports that had 2 different takes on the mid-sized issue, but I mean, it speaks to the level to which it's, an emerging trend in our industry to care about the mid-sized folks. I see Joshua Lennon's in the audience. I talked to Joshua about Clio's mid-sized report, and in particular, carrying over. They were talking a lot in that report. And the thing that I found most interesting was continuing this concept of lockup that a lot of us wrote about when talked about back at ClioCon, that, there's these firms that have money that they're owed that's just kind of sitting out there that they aren't getting in time. And, time is money. And they could be getting it if they had better, better systems in place. And it seemed, and what that report showed was that mid-sized firms are billing more and making more money than ever, and have some of the worst lockup situations of any of the sectors. And that's the kind of thing that happens when you throw people at a problem that tech could easily solve. And then I also wrote a piece about Action Step. Their report talked about a bunch of other things. They dealt with mid-sized firms on the vector of like wellness and work from home situations. But they also kind of got at a question that I thought was interesting in light of the Clio report also, which was they talked to people at these mid-sized firms about like generational differences and who thinks they need to be investing more in technology. As you might imagine, it's the younger folks. Part of that is their nature of the job. There's more tedious work at the bottom of a law firm totem pole, but also, they're more tech savvy. And a number that popped out with me was, other than the youngest folks, most of the folks in mid-size, most of the other segments of the age group generations, thought this is a problem that could probably be solved with more people, which reflects kind of an ingrained thinking of years and years of that being how mid-sized firms could work. They have more resources at hand than small firms, but they don't need to fight the big firms, and so they can just hire another accountant or whatever. So it was interesting, and the both reports suggest that mid-size's moment is kind of coming. That they're seeing increased interest in tech investment, and we're seeing, I also had other people I talked to who said they were seeing folks at Legal Week that way. So it was interesting. I think that might be a theme going forward is, are the mid-sized and regional people going to start playing in our little sandbox that we've enjoyed here for a while?
Oh, I for sure think they are. I do appreciate Joy's question though, of like, how do we define mid-size? Like from how many to how many? Because I feel like the number is always smaller than I think it is, because the jump to hundreds of firms is so big. So like I mean, is there a general consensus?
So Joshua answers this vis-a-vis in the chat. Joshua answers this in vis-a-vis the Clio report. The Clio report is focused on 20 plus lawyers.
But up to what?
I think 100. I'm not positive.
That's always my question. Like where do we get to Biglaw is my Yeah,
I think that's it. But I will also say that the ActionStep used a different metric. I believe their metric was 50 to 100 employees, which I don't believe they were limited to just lawyers. So, to some extent, 20 lawyers, it probably might be 50 employees when you count paralegals and staff and so on. But I think they went with that. So it's vague, but it's kind of in that squishy.
And I think so. You really have to be sort of careful when you talk about the mid-sized firm. You use the term regional, and like a regional firm, that could be 100, 150, even a law firm of 100 employees or lawyers is going to have a different set of problems, different set of clients, different set of matters than a mid-sized firm of 20. Right. So anytime we get into, anytime you get into a discussion of what mid-sized firms, you first have to say, okay, I'm going to say mid-sized firms are X to X, and we're going to focus on their business models and opportunities and problems, and a different definition of all those for a big firm. I mean, if I'm in an AmLaw 50 firm, I would say, a law firm of 250 is mid-size, right? So it's really sort of depends on your perspective and kind of the grouping that you want to do by not just so much numbers, but also types of matters.
Well, and that's
I was just going to say, one of the reasons I put them together a lot is that I kind of view they're not perfect overlaps, but I always think that if you're in that kind of mid-sized bucket, you probably aren't power projecting outside of your region. You're probably concentrated in a place. You're bigger than the smalls in that place, but you aren't probably with 50 people being national or global. So that's why I have that overlap. But you're right, it doesn't necessarily work.
Well, and I think the perspective issue is important, because if you ask a New York lawyer, like from the city, what's a mid-sized firm? Their answer is going to be very different than a lawyer here in Rochester when you ask them what's a mid-sized firm. I do agree with that regional component. I mean, typically, but you can, what I would call, until I started in the legal tech space, when I was just practicing here in Rochester, in my mind, a mid-sized firm was a firm that had maybe 20 lawyers, and had, probably 50 employees. And the large firms are the ones that had 150 lawyers. But those large firms, with the exception of Nukes and Peabody, were all regional firms, because we didn't have large firms here in Rochester. I know there's like these industry standards, but I also think it's really different depending on, and if you're looking in rural areas, like they don't even have large firms, they're going to think a mid-sized firm in a rural area is a firm with 5 lawyers. So, and what's really interesting, because, I've been doing these legal tech reports for a long time and doing these surveys, and also just writing about legal tech for a long time. And I've been in a tech company for 11 years, and the needs are really, like, when you're talking about practice management, which is what I know, the needs of firms, you can almost like slice and dice it more than just small, mid-size, and large. Like the needs of firms as you add users, which someone in the comment mentions, really start to vary significantly, also by practice area as well. So it's really interesting to kind of see how the different companies define midsize when they create these reports, and whether that's even something that's going to resonate with the firms themselves, and how do they define themselves. So that's sometimes a challenge to do data points on firms of those sizes for that reason. But it's really interesting. The data points you get are interesting to compare.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
There's
know,
a whole
I practiced with a firm, you know, that ranged in size from maybe 250 to 500 around the time I left. And we often would view law firm sizes sort of in terms of who our competitors were. So a small firm would be, I don't know, 50, maybe even 100 and below, because we don't compete for the same business with those kind of firms. You know, another firm of 700 would be a competitor. And so, you know, that's sort of the way we would view things. And that's a little, I mean, a little different than what's big. How do you define mid and large and all of that? Maybe one way to look at it is who the firm competes with for business, because that sort of is telling in a lot of ways. Whoever I interrupted,
another
I'm
way
sorry.
another way to look at this whole issue is that the reason these reports are coming out from these vendors about these firms is that these vendors are suddenly all trying to get a foothold in these firms. And, you know, Clio sort of formally announced, was it last week or the week before, that, you know, they are now going to be developing for the mid-size market. You know, we've got this dynamic going on where there is this a very increasingly crowded small firm practice management market where all these companies are consolidating. I mean, there's Clio, Affinipay, Paradigm, ProfitSolve, what's it, Carrot, the whole Leap Smokeball group. They're all competing against each other after this small firm market. And if you want to expand, one way to expand is to go up market. And you know, I think obviously that's part of what Clio is trying to do here, is to trying to build up its audience into the larger firm market. And that market itself is already now starting to get really crowded with these other practice management platforms out there, like, you know, Filevine and Litify and ActionStep, as you mentioned, Centerbase, SurePoint, Aderant. I mean, there's a bunch of them now out there for that market. So, I mean, suddenly, I think part of the reason everybody's suddenly paying a lot of attention to the mid-sized market is because they see a big opportunity there. And I mean, it's sort of the flip side of what you were already saying earlier, Joe. But it's an interesting dynamic right now.
Well,
Yeah, and I absolutely agree that, I mean, regardless of how we define it, all the technology is definitely gonna, like Joe, you said, is you're gonna see more of them playing in our sandbox. Like, I 100% think so. I think technology and AI in particular are definitely gonna let smaller, mid-sized, however you want to define them, play with the big kids in a way they haven't been able to before. I absolutely think that's true.
Well, the other thing that I think is interesting though, Bob, and I think you guys will recall this, probably 3 or 4 years ago, there was a shift towards trying to target that market, and some companies backed off and went back to solos and smalls. So people tried this, and the mid-sized market wasn't ripe. I mean, I actually recall, I think Clio was one of the ones that did it, but they weren't the only one. There are a couple companies that shifted towards, like, pushing towards mid-size and saying they were going to do that. And then I think all of them kind of collectively, it wasn't just like one company, kind of backtracked a little bit, because that market is just a really challenging market, because they have either in-house IT or else they have outsourced IT. Outsourced IT was very threatened by the cloud because they lost a lot of their job functions if a firm started the cloud. And then in-house IT with these mid-sized firms didn't want their job descriptions to change, so they pushed back and terrified them about all the security issues. So those firms were just kind of at a standstill when it came to adopting the cloud. And I think there's sort of a shift, and that's why you're seeing more firms release, or more companies releasing these reports that are targeting it, and this secondary shift, because those firms finally may be ripe for the pickings, if you will.
The larger the firm, the harder the sell.
That's true. Thomson Reuters had a report not long ago, and one of their points was that some of the larger companies are beginning to shift more work to what they defined as mid-sized firms. And I can't remember the Thomson Reuters definition, but because of the lower billing rates that those firms provided, which is a little bit of a catch-22 for the mid-sized firms, because, you know, they're going to get more work from more sophisticated clients because their rates are lower, but the more sophisticated clients are going to demand more in terms of efficiencies and technology and sophistication that may squeeze them on the other side. So, I mean, they've always been in an interesting spot, no matter how you define them.
All right. Victor, shall we jump over and talk about some judicial discipline issues?
Yeah. So yeah. So this is a story that law.com wrote up, and then well, I guess actually no,
Broached.
start before I start, I'm gonna plug our class of legal, the ABA Journal and ABA Center for Innovation class of legal rebels for 2014. Actually, it is a change from the usual. We didn't actually induct people. We didn't do that. We actually just looked at generative AI and how that's changed, how that's already in the process of changing certain practice areas like criminal law, immigration, practice management, things like that. So it was just sort of like, rather than just having like, looking at spotlighting individuals and what they're doing, we took a look at the technology and how it's already been a disruptive force and how people are already integrating it into their practices and whatnot. So it's kind of a change of pace from what we usually do, but I'll put that in the chat. People can feel free to read it at their leisure.
Oh, you got it.
Love it. Send me a note. If you don't love it, then don't bother sending me a note. Yeah. So the story that I wanted to do this week is there's a judge in New Jersey who is there was an ethics complaint that alleged that he abused his power by allowing his secretary to work remotely in violation of office policy. And so I guess there are some specific things about the Jersey court system is that like they certain court employees, including like I think clerks and secretaries and judges, were specifically specifically excluded from the work from home policy that went into effect after COVID. So they weren't allowed to work from home for more than a certain amount of time or a certain number of days per week or something like that. And so this particular judge's secretary, who they don't identify, but they identify by their initials. So I'm sure it's really hard for people who don't know this judge. This judge got in trouble for working from home like for like longer than the permissible amount of time. And so I mean obviously it just kind of feeds into the whole kind of ongoing debate about remote work versus on-site work. But it also kind of it does kind of make you wonder, like, well, judges are supposed to be such sticklers for rules and if for like opinions or directives that come down. So for this judge to like not know that his secretary was working in violation of this stated policy, it's a little hard to swallow that. But I mean, hey, I guess stranger things have happened, or maybe he just didn't think it was a big deal and or just wasn't sure about just how strict they were going to be about it. Because I mean, sometimes you have these things where it's like, okay, well, we say it, but as long as nothing happens, we don't really care. So, but yeah, it just kind of feeds into the ongoing debate about that and sort of the idea of how whether this judge probably should have known that this was going on.
Part of the problem is it's such a stupid rule.
That too, yeah. I mean, I understand why judges can't work remotely, but I feel like a secretary, I mean, or clerk, I mean, if you're just looking up stuff all the time, or if you're, I mean, not to minimize what they do, but like if the vast bulk of their duties is, are to, do research or to handle administrative tasks or, scheduling or, calendaring and that kind of stuff, you feel like you could probably do a lot of that stuff remotely. But I don't know how if they've had a problem with people working remotely, or this was something that had to be done in person, or I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, clerks are one thing because clerks, you generally have to interface with the public quite a bit, and there's that sort of in-person role to it. But the judge's secretary, you tend to think is just somebody who's primarily going to deal with the judge or maybe with other lawyers on the phone or something or by email, but not where they have to be in the office. Anyway, but you're right. I mean, it's kind of interesting that judges who are they hold us to rules, and they should be able to abide by them as well, I guess.
Actually, yeah, someone, I think Dennis had a comment about New Jersey and people no showing no showing work. So I guess yeah, there is that.
Yeah, I suppose. All right. Well, that assumes there's still work for them to show up for. And Steve, you had a story this week that raises
Yeah.
more questions about that, I guess.
Yeah, actually it's Dennis Garcia, who I think several of us know in-house at Microsoft. He posted this
Dennis.
on his blog. It was a study done by an outfit called the Burning Glass Institute and the Society for Human Resource Management. I'd not heard of either one of them, but there were some interesting observations. And one of the observations was that the legal profession is perhaps more threatened by AI and generative AI tools than many others, second only to mortgage brokers. I didn't quite follow the logic of that. And you know, the whole idea was that these tools will automate more and more sophisticated tasks that people in law firms or people who work for lawyers or people who are lawyers used to do or have done traditionally. It occurred to me in looking at that doesn't necessarily mean there'll be a less need for lawyers. It could mean there'll be less need for people that would be performing these tasks that could be automated, which I guess in some cases could be lawyers, in some cases might be other people and lawyers. The other thing that occurred to me as we were talking about the mid-sized firms is, you know, many of those firms, well, query how many of those firms are profitable because they have lawyers perhaps doing some of these less sophisticated matters that could be automated and might impact them in the future. Dennis included a couple of charts from the reports which talked about skills that would be important in the future and wouldn't be important in the future. Things like creativity and understanding neural networks and being able to explain AI would be skills that would be important in the future. Skills that wouldn't be important in the future were writing and basic content creation and research, which, you know, I guess we're all sort of screwed. So everybody enjoy the show because, you know, before long, there'll just be bots sitting here doing it. And then the other point that was made is that, you know, the least affected jobs will be primarily blue collar jobs. And they gave an example in the report that people that work for places like McDonald's probably won't be threatened by generative AI as much as people that work for accountants, for example. So the good news is that all 6 of us will soon be working at McDonald's. And we can you know, discuss the McDonald's work you know at our weekly
McDonald's
show.
is going with those kiosks. McDonald's is going with those kiosks now too. Like they don't.
Okay.
Now you're lucky. You're lucky if there are like 3 people on the back.
The other thing that this report did, it was made a very interesting analogy to the ATM, the advent of ATMs in the banking industry. And when ATMs came along, the big concern was it would replace tellers. In fact, what happened was it lowered the cost of opening a bank or having a physical bank. So banks opened more banks now than there ever were, because it doesn't cost as much to create one. And that the tellers that were people that were formerly tellers began doing additional higher end tasks like advising customers about finances and, you know, making some financial recommendations. And actually the number of college graduates who are tellers is higher now than it was before ATMs came along. So the point being that you don't necessarily know how automation is going to ultimately affect the job market until it sort of unfolds. So it was a pretty interesting report, I thought, even though I had not heard of these people that did it. but it's worth reading, and I'll put a link to it in the chat if anybody wants to take a look at it. It's free.
All right.
So there you go.
All right. I
McDonald's,
was
here
going
we
to talk
come.
about, I did a story this week on more, I think actually I might have talked about it a little bit last week on sort of what I'm calling the justice gap in legal tech. I did sort of the difference in funding between big tech and tech for access to justice and all of that. But maybe because it's Friday and I'm not feeling like talking about serious subjects so much, I'm gonna instead just talk about this other story I did on this law student who developed this Gen AI product that he was inspired to do after a bathroom break in law school. I really I really like talking to this guy because he was a third year law student who had actually already developed a couple of products that he's got out there, but he's developed this thing. Yes, another Lex product, Dennis, as somebody pointed out, called Lexplug, which I'm not quite sure what that means, but he was in class and had taken a bathroom break, and when he came back, the professor was asking questions about the case, and he hadn't read the case; he'd only read a brief of the case, and the questions that the professor was asking weren't answered in the brief. So he very quickly, while he's sitting there in class, went and downloaded the case and then uploaded it to GPT-4 and started questioning GPT-4 about the case, and of course was able to get the answer to whatever it was the professor was asking. So he decided, well, there's a product in this, and he basically developed this site for law students where he started out just making a whole bunch of case briefs so that you can go and download a case brief and access it there. And then now he's just released a feature where anybody can go basically ask for a case by name and citation, and it'll generate the case briefs. But on top of that, it's got a couple of fun features. One is called the Gunner Bot, which is, I guess, gunner is as I wrote in my story, a somewhat pejorative term to describe those overeager law students who are always raising their hands.
It's an extremely pejorative term.
Yeah. And so it's a great name for a feature, I think. And basically, it's just a chat interface into the cases. So essentially, as you're looking at a brief on his site, a case brief on his site, the full text of the case is also there in the background, and you can just kind of ask questions against the full text of the case. And then it's got another feature, not that exciting, where you can take the brief that generative AI has created and ask it to put it into simpler terms. Explain like I'm five, sort of another kind of Reddit concept, and just press the explain like I'm five button. It'll put the case into simpler to understand terms. So I thought that was kind of clever. He's a fun guy. He was a programmer before he went to law school, and he's developed several other tools, including a Chrome plugin where you can kind of put a question in plain language into it, or a fact scenario in plain language into it, and it'll just give you a bunch of searches to use in Westlaw and Lexis based on the fact scenario that you've written in there. So it's always fun to see law students doing stuff like that, and he may be soon entering the legal tech world, graduating this year. So let's see what he does. Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
I mean, I know you skipped over, but I actually thought I really liked your article on the A to J conference, and
Yeah, well, we can talk about it.
yeah, sorry. I thought of a
I mean,
tie-in though. Rather, when we talk about this, rather than David versus Goliath, can we go with grasshopper versus dinosaur?
exactly. Yeah. No, I thought that one, it's interesting because that one, I got a lot of response to that. I mean, I had a ton of emails, basically just, we were all at Legal Week, and then I went from Legal Week to the Innovations in Tech conference put on by the Legal Services Corporation. And it was just such a dramatic juxtaposition going from one to the other, because I think both Steve and I think use the word glitz in our summaries of Legal Week, because that's really what it is. And there's just so much money being spent there, and just reflects all the money going into that industry. But it's all tech being developed for large law and large corporate, and maybe medium law, depending on how we define it. But then you get to this other conference, and there's just so little money going into developing tech, and yet there's some really innovative stuff going on, and that was being demonstrated at this conference. But and again, when you think about the imbalance in who's being served, I mean, the people on at the Legal Services Conference are tackling legal problems of a large majority of the people in the United States on very small budgets and with very few resources, whereas the people at Legal Week are serving, the legal needs of the 1%ers of the United States, and with a lot of money. And it's just a gross imbalance. And I unfortunately, we do live in a capitalist society, and it's kind of hard to know exactly how to tackle that. But I think, one thing is that some of the bigger companies can be doing a lot more to just make their products available to people serving low-income people, or serving access to justice issues. And I know a lot of companies do that. And I mean, we've talked here about Relativity. I know Co-Counsel has been donating their software in some cases. I think Clio, and Joshua can talk more about that, but I know Clio has a whole program. Clio also launched a version of their software for legal services last week, and so there are companies doing that. But I think somehow some of that money that's being invested, the total of the biggest source of money for legal services is this TIG grants. It's $5 million a year, whereas what was it, 1.4 something like that billion invested in Biglaw tech last year, legal tech last year. So it's a real imbalance, and hopefully we can figure out some way to address it.
5 million would probably barely cover the cost of some of those parties in New York.
Right.
As you were talking though, Bob, you know what I think is interesting? More and more often I hear people saying we're living in a capitalist society, not a democratic society. I feel like capitalism is like taken over. I mean, not that we're not living in a democratic society, but I feel like that used to be the hallmark of the United States, and it has shifted over time, this sort of balance and the emphasis of what type of society we are. At least from my perspective. I see you over there.
Every decision seems to be a decision that has to be justified by the money or the return on investment, and nothing else. That's a very good point, Niki.
Well, as Senator, excuse me, as Senator Mike Lee, who is not related to me, points out that we are not in a democracy, we are a constitutional republic, and I guess that's their way of saying that we don't need democracy anymore. So why bother? Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's just one of those things where, for the longest time we were content to just kind of assume that, democratization of these services was like sort of like a hallmark of capitalism, sort of like the market kind of, dictating that these services and whatnot would be democratized and whatnot. But so they kind of see something that kind of goes against that. It's a little bit jarring, but I guess it makes sense, in a lot of ways, because it ultimately, like all of you have said, ultimately the bottom line is about making money, paying the bills, scaling and whatnot. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess it shouldn't be a surprise, but it still is sort of, like it does. There is sort of a jarring effect just to see that.
I would take issue with it's not making money paying the bills. I'm being really nitpicky here. It's profit at all costs. That's what and you definitely incorporated that in what you said. It feels to me like it just gotten to this point where all anyone cares about is profit and shareholders. And it's sort of always been that way, but I just feel like it's become the emphasis. I don't know.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's a capitalism issue. I mean, this is all about venture capitalists and private equity investors, and even people who are bootstrapping their own companies. I mean, they're all in it to make money. And as I said in my story, I quoted the famous bank robber Willie Sutton. Said, when asked why do you rob banks, he says because where the money is. And that's true of in the legal tech world, where the money is with big law and big corporate. And but there are companies, justice tech companies, that are successfully making money by focusing on the access to justice market. They're probably not making the money that I don't know, Reveal and Disco and whoever else are making right now based on their parties. But you can be a profit making company and serve that market.
Well, and that's why I often say that the problem is not the profit motive per se, while that's definitely an issue. It's timing, it's speed. There used to be a day where you could say, do you bring in more money than you let out? Great, you're a profitable company. We love you. Now, quarterly numbers matter, and nickel and diming an extra penny is a huge deal for investors because otherwise they can just jump all their money to somewhere else. And it's that shortening of the window that I think is really dangerous. It means that a lot of innovation, I fear, that happens at the small level, once you reach a certain size, that innovation is tamped down because no one wants you to invest in any kind of a long-term vision. The backers need to see an extra penny that month or that quarter.
Well, have you guys watched Silicon Valley on HBO? There was a scene where like they were talking about like what their like revenue, what the revenue models would be, and like immediately like their billionaire benefactor was like, no revenue. You want to be pre-revenue because that way if you put a figure on your company, then that's what you're stuck with. But if you're pre-revenue and you're not, you don't have value, you could be anything. It could be whatever people assign, whatever value people assign to you. And I think, yeah, it's kind of like at that point, then you're getting to fake money at that point. Like money that doesn't even exist, money that's not real. It's kind of like, but that's how it works now.
Well, and Joe, I agree with what you just said about the shorter and shorter points of time that sort of and the need for profit during those points of time that reduces the long-term innovation. But one thing I would just say to counter that a little bit is that part of the reality of private equity investment and is that they invest for like a 3 to 5 year period, usually, like when they come in, and there's a lot of spend on that and their goal is to get to a certain point and exit after a certain point of time, right? Like to make a certain level of profit. And so in the beginning, they do invest for the long term, which is 3 to 5 years, so that they can get to that point. So there's actually like a lot of spend in the beginning cycle, and then it's at the tail end where they're trying to get all their numbers in place and make sure that they look good for the next investor, and that's when it slows down. So there's definitely that quarterly pressure to report to the board as it would, as is common. But also there is also a cycle that you see in private equity as well, which is also kind of interesting to watch, that has some long-term investment, but it's not like 10, 15 years down the road. It definitely is like a shorter, and the definition of profit and success has changed a lot. And I think the digital revolution has impacted that too. Everything moves, the news cycle's faster. Everything's faster. Now it's like 24-hour. Now it's like hourly news cycles at this point. So it's interesting the world we're in now.
Yeah, I will say, there is, as I said, there is innovation going on in that space. There's interesting stuff. On my podcast this past week, I had the 3 of the people involved with the Legal Aid of North Carolina Innovation Lab, the first legal aid office in the country to launch an innovation lab and have a chief innovation officer in their legal services program. And apparently, although they were the first just last year, there are now a couple of others that are also at least looking at that or have added chief innovation officers. So, and they're also looking to partner with different funding sources than legal aid has traditionally looked to, and also partner with some of the private companies and private and larger law firms that are able to help them and able to provide some resources that they haven't traditionally had available to them. So it's a really interesting time, I think, in that space. and it'll be interesting to follow what happens with that whole legal aid community, and then the broader access to justice community in terms of tech. All right. Well, Stephanie, thank you for urging me to talk about that. All right. Anything else? Any more grasshoppers or?
No, I did have an actual legal tech story though. The Salted, the Africa,
Oh, yeah.
South African Legal Tech Network. Yes, I wasn't only grasshoppers and dinosaurs.
And
There's more to
multitudes.
I had one that was more an
Salt-
intersection of tech and law, and that was the Waymo car that
Salted.
pedestrian, which is, it's just, I think that's notable that you keep seeing the AI algorithms. That was definitely an algorithm issue. And in my AI talk, I have a Tesla that was getting confused by a horse-drawn carriage, and it keeps making it look like it's a truck that's going backwards with maybe a bike on the front of the truck that's driving backwards, like it can't figure out the horse and carriage. And sounds a lot like that's what happened in this situation. So those cases always interest me because it's like AI algorithms and there's lots of litigation that comes out of them. And so that's just worth a quick mention. I don't know if there's no point to deep dive, but I know you included that in the digest. So I think it's an interesting thing for someone to take a look at if they're interested.
Yeah. And what was the Salted is what is it, South African Legal Technology? Or something
Yeah,
like that?
South African Legal Technology Network. They have a new division, which is educational division, Salted. And they've launched a platform and they have courses to basically democratize legal technology education and other like technology aspects of other kinds of law. The whole idea being to get to even to rural areas and not just focusing in the urban centers. And it was a really interesting initiative, I thought. And I love to hear what's going on in other parts of the world about legal tech, not just us.
Yeah.
Good point.
All right. Well, we are Victor, I know you're going to maybe not make it to all of Tech Show next week, or maybe a little bit. You're going to be there a little bit, right?
No, I'll be there. I'll be there for Summer Valley. I'll be there all Friday and Saturdays. Thursday a little bit dicey for me, but I'll still be like overseeing our coverage of it at the Journal and whatnot. So I'll be there. I'll be paying attention, but on Thursday I might not be physically there, but I'll be there the rest of the time.
All right. Should we try to figure out if we can do a show next week, or should we just can it for next week? Probably won't work, right? Because we're all going to be busy at Tech Show. And
I'm leaving early on Friday anyway, so
on Friday?
yeah, like midday Friday. So right before the show. So
all right. Yeah, we'll probably.
But I gotta say
I'll be
one
pretty
slight pet peeve I have, and I don't know if this is but like 1660 at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, that's gonna be rough.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to that. I enjoyed that last year, but that part I'm not doing. I'll be around Friday though.
It's 8 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, that's gonna be rough.
Oh man. Anybody who schedules anything at 8 o'clock in the morning.
On a Saturday too.
Yeah, really? Okay.
I see what you did there.
Testing everyone's commitment.
Oh,
all right. Well, yeah, that was also maybe a subtle job at Xterra.
Yeah,
I
caught on late.
Who else did it? Somebody did it. Was that who did they did the briefing at like 8 o'clock? But they did have good food. I'll give them credit for that.
They did.
Nice.
Yeah.
It was a nice spread.
I think it's directed towards a panelist than what you just said.
Oh, right. I forgot about
Who's
that.
having a morning briefing. Oh God, you forgot about, I really thought that's what you were doing there. All right.
But I thought we got that rescheduled, no?
Did we?
Almost?
Niki?
Yeah.
Did we move our 8 o'clock meeting?
Instead, I was gonna say it. Instead, it's just the
People in the audience are like, what the heck are they talking about?
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I'll send it.
Take it to Slack. We'll take it to Slack.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope everybody has a good week and a lot of fun at Tech Show. See some of you in the chat and in the audience there. And if not, we'll report back in 2 weeks on what happened next show. Have a good week, everybody. See you.
Take care.